class. I wanted to talk today about writing about literature. I think, one of the main things that I encounter when reading literature papers is that students work on summarizing or giving a book report about the literature, even when they're trying to avoid it. I understand why this happens. In middle school and high school, you're basically asked to summarize the reading to prove to your teacher that you read it. And when you're in college, we're not looking for that anymore. We're looking for you to actually use literary criticism and literary terminology and techniques to analyze the literature and discuss the meaning of the literature. So my analogy for this is to imagine that you and I went to a movie together. And we went to see a movie that I have seen many, many times before, but that you've never seen. We come out of the movie, we go get dinner, and we talk about the movie. And you proceed to sit down and tell me, scene by scene, what happened in this movie that I have seen many, many times before, and you have never seen. It's totally unnecessary. It's just, you don't need to do it because your teacher's read this story many times. We're not looking for proof that you read this. The students here, you're all adults. Many of you are in the military. You're working adults. You're not children. You're sacrificing your time. You're sacrificing your money to be here. And you don't have to prove to me that you read the reading. I know you did. It's totally unnecessary for you to summarize at all. There needs to be zero. You need zero summary that is in your essay only for the sake of summary. Now, where you will summarize is when you're kind of pointing to me what you're talking about. So while you're never just going to say, this is what happened in the story, you're going to say when this happened in the story. You're not going to phrase it like that, but you'll show the part that happened and then discuss the meaning behind it. So you really want to, focus on not summarizing and only discussing the parts of the essay as it pertains to your analysis. Some, websites and such will tell you that you can have a paragraph or so of summary. You really don't need it. You don't want it. You don't want any more summary than is needed to specifically show how you're analyzing the essay. So anytime you start to summarize when you're writing a literature essay in any literature class, just kind of stop and ask yourself, if I was talking about a movie that my friends saw a bunch of times and we just watched together that night, would I feel the need to retell them this part, or would I just feel the need to kind of point them at the fact that I'm talking about this part? So that's really the first thing you want to keep in mind, and one of the major things that literature professors find frustrating when their students are writing literature essays. Now, my second point here is to use a thesis statement, and if you notice, I wrote a thesis statement for what I was going to talk about here because this is the third time I tried to film this video and I got off track. So you want to use a thesis statement. You want to create a defendable thesis statement. You're going to look at the literature and you're going to make a point about it. So let's say, to use the analogy of a movie again, if I was writing about the Terminator, I might write a thesis statement that focuses on the fact that the movie The Terminator tells the story of Mary and Jesus. You have a woman who gets pregnant from someone who technically doesn't exist, which is similar to a virgin pregnancy, and then a savior of the world. So I would write a thesis statement that would highlight those points. And then I would go throughout the essay and I would prove it. I wouldn't summarize the movie. I would prove the points of it. So it's really important to create a thesis statement that you can defend. So remember, your thesis statement should never be a statement of fact. Now, in a literature class, you don't necessarily need a three-part thesis statement. I teach a lot of writing classes, so I immediately used a three-part thesis statement. But a literature essay doesn't, need to have a three-part thesis statement. You can, if you took English 101 and you want to write a three-part thesis statement, I'll tell you, literature teachers love seeing that really clear three-part thesis statement at the end of the introduction. Your thesis statement, all classes, all assignments, it should be at the end of your introduction, your thesis statement, unless it's asked for at the beginning, but it really almost never is. So make sure you write that thesis statement that is something that you can defend. It's not just a statement of fact. It's not, something like Terminator is a movie that stars Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, that's not something you can defend. You have to come up with a unique point of analyzing the reading, and then you want to defend that throughout, spend the entire essay defending that. So now my last point here is to stay focused on the literature. It's really easy to kind of go off on a tangent or just kind of get distracted talking about things that are somewhat related to what you were talking about. So what you really want to kind of do is just keep pulling yourself back to the literature, how the literature relates to what you're discussing relates to the theme. So, if you're saying that the theme of, say one of the stories that you read is love, you don't want to just talk about love in general. If there's a whole lot of that just feels like filler, you want to only talk about it as it relates to the literature. Always pull it back to the literature and how everything relates to the literature. Reference the literature directly, but not too often. Avoid large passages unless you absolutely need them. If you do, use a block quotation, but you really want to avoid those. You only want to use the literature to support what you're saying. So you absolutely want to use the literature. You just don't want to use too much of it. Imagine it if you're cooking, kind of like using a ton of pepper. Like, you wouldn't have an entire meal where you're just eating a bowl of pepper. That would be horrible. You wouldn't have a meal where half of it or a quarter of it is spicy pepper. Even if you really like spicy food, that would be weird. You really just want to season it, correctly with the pepper or with the seasoning in general. And that's kind of how your quotes are. They're going to support what you're saying. They're not going to say it for you. And you're going to keep them probably at about 10% of your essay. You just want to kind of integrate them into into sentences and just kind of work them in there. Don't have them stand alone, and don't put them at the end of each paragraph. Just work them right into what you're saying. Use a little bit to support what you're saying and cite it. If you paraphrase, cite it. And, focus on the literature, but don't let the literature itself overpower your essay, but also don't not use any of it. So either side of that extreme is going to get you a significantly lower grade. So that's kind of what I want to say about actually writing about literature. To recap, you want to avoid summary. You want to use a thesis statement that you can defend throughout your essay, and your essay will stay focused on that thesis statement throughout, and you want to stay focused on the literature. So in addition to that, I just want to talk a little bit about formatting. Now, in literature classes, you're almost exclusively going to be using MLA format. You may be using APA or Chicago or something in your major, but you're going to be using MLA in your literature class. Now, it's more important to cite at all to format at all than to format in the correct style. So, if you don't use any citation style, you're going to get a really bad grade or a 0 on the assignment if it comes across as plagiarism because you're not citing. So if you end up citing in APA, you're probably just going to lose a couple of points, but you're supposed to cite in MLA. In MLA, we use an MLA heading, and it's not on a separate page. It's on the same page, I have a little cold, as your essay. Then you're going to want to create a unique and engaging title. So if you're writing about the Terminator, your title can't be Essay about the Terminator, or The Terminator, or Terminator Essay 1. It has to be something that kind of pulls back to your thesis statement and something that represents your essay itself. So if I got 20 papers about the Terminator, I should have 20 completely unique titles that are just, totally different based on what the student is actually writing about. I'm sorry. So now remember to indent the first line of each paragraph. Every paragraph, you want at least 5 sentences per paragraph, and you want at least 5 paragraphs per essay. So, I forgot to open my parentheses. So I'll call this the 5 by 5 rule, right? 5 by 5. You want 5 sentences, 5 paragraphs, and this is your bare minimum. You may need so much more. You may have to write a 10-page essay. You may have to write a 20-page essay. I don't know what classes you are. I don't know how far you're going. But you're never really going to want to write an essay that is less than that unless you're specifically asked for it. You may have a teacher who just wants a couple paragraphs, says, give me 2 to 3 paragraphs on this topic. It's not a full essay. It's not a full scholarly essay. A full scholarly essay will never be less than 5 paragraphs. That is the absolute minimum. It may be a lot more, it'll never be less, and your paragraphs should never be fewer than 5 sentences each. So remember, indent, you want your paragraphs. Now, for those of you, especially if you're in the military, the police, or medical field too, you're probably used to being really direct and getting to the point. And that's great. But in academic writing, we don't we don't do that. You know, if the military writing is to say what you have to say in as few words as possible, academic writing is to say what you have to say in as many words as possible. And that probably becomes clear when you're watching videos of mine. What we do in academic writing is basically, in our introduction, we tell the reader what we're going to tell them. Then in our body paragraphs, we tell the reader what we told them. And then in our conclusion, in the body paragraphs, we're telling the readers what we're telling them. And then in our conclusion, we tell the reader what we told them. So you are going to make your main points 3 times. Once in your thesis, once in your body paragraph, but for each main point, and then once in your conclusion. So, you know, remember your conclusion, you don't ever want to introduce new information, you just want to use it at least 5 sentences to wrap up what you already said, basically. So now I want to just show you a quick little thing. Let me just pull this up. The software I use to record kind of slows things down a little. So I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Page Break. So when you write your essay, and you're done writing your essay, and you want to do your works cited, use Insert Page Break. Never use the Tab button or the Enter button to come down to the next page, because that formatting doesn't necessarily translate over to your professor's computer. So use Insert Page Break, like I just did. So then you're going to do your works cited. And one thing you want to label your works cited. You want to put your sources in alphabetical order, and you want to use a hanging indent. So I'm just gonna all right, and this has done that, which it shouldn't have done. So you want to use a hanging indent, which means up, and that always happens, and I love that it happens because I know it's going to happen to you, and you're going to be confused about what to do. So when you're trying to use a hanging indent and it tries to shift your entire source over, just press Enter, and then it will let you use a hanging indent. So each of your sources really should look like this. You're going to have last name, first name, the rest of your citation. If you need help citing your sources, go to Mla Citation Wizard. It's called like CIF 21 or something like that. It's a strange website, but if you put in Mla Citation Wizard, it should come up. It's my favorite citation generator. It is the most accurate. So just use a citation generator. There's really no reason to ever cite by hand in 2022. And last name, alphabetical order, use a hanging indent. If you have more lines than this, you're going to use a hanging indent throughout. So like that. So basically your works cited, you want it to kind of look like that. First line over, then indented in. Next one, your first line is flush and then over. Make sure that your whole essay is left justified. Don't center your sources. That's not correct. You want to use a hanging indent. Don't center your essay. Left justify your essay. Work MLA heading, left justified. And, Times New Roman 12 is a really good font. We like that. Don't use weird fonts. And this is basically how you write an essay. I would also suggest saving it like your last name and the title of the essay, or what essay it is, essay 1, essay 2. That way, if your teacher downloads all the essays at once or something like that, they can see exactly whose essay they're grading. Just a little tip that makes teachers, happy. So this is how you write a literature essay.